emerging university. So it is,
Sir.
every aspiring kind of a person who wants to communicate looks forward to an invite to your university. So allow me to say it was very gratifying when Professor Malhotra asked me, and I that. Thank you for inviting Professor Joshi. Thank you. Colonel Joshi, you are also a professor by virtue of being a director. Thank you, Colonel Joshi. Thank you indeed.
Thanks a ton, sir. It's 11 o'clock. I will request now, with your permission, Divya may start the proceedings, sir.
Thank you, sir. I would like to welcome everyone, and Rahul, being the moderator for today. Rahul, kindly take over and start the proceedings.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Director, sir. So welcome everyone. Very good morning to all of you. And as we know that we have a special lecture which we generally conduct from school sites on a weekly basis, where we bring the most experienced professionals who are dedicated to the field of security and national security. So today we are hosting a very distinguished lecture from Lieutenant General KJ Singh, and who is going to speak on PLA's capability and China-Pak nexus. So as we see that in today's 21st century, there's a lot of growing convergence between China and Pakistan, and it has direct and indirect implications for Indian national security, India's foreign and security policy, and it is going to impact the broad Asian security order as well. So keeping in mind these larger trends, Lieutenant General KJ Singh is going to deliver a talk on these issues, and I welcome all the audience, including our students and distinguished faculty, the very experienced Shekhar Adhikari sir, who has dedicated his life for the defense and strategic studies, and I also welcome all the external guests who have joined us from different places. Now I request our director, Colonel Deepak Joshi, to introduce our distinguished speaker for the day. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Rahul. Good morning, everybody. Lieutenant General KJ Singh, PVSM, Bar to AVSM, a former Western Army commander, Professor Shekhar Adhikari, dear students, our guests from outside. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker today. He is from 63 Cavalry, elite armored regiment. He has been the Western Army commander, a very formidable force which is there, and it is operationally committed. And having been an operationally committed corps, also commanded by him in Northeast, and an armored division, which is a pride for a lot of officers to command an armored division, which has more than, I think, 800 odd A vehicle itself. It's a formidable force. He was the State Information Commissioner of Haryana up till recently. He's a senior advisor with Defense Research and Studies, DRAS as it's called. It's an upcoming think tank, and he's holding the prestigious Ranjit Singh Chair of Excellence in the Punjab University, Chandigarh. General Singh often speaks on national and international news channels on strategic and military affairs, and today he would be sharing his wisdom on a topic of utmost importance to us and to India's national security, that is on the People's Liberation Army, PLA as it is called, and its capability and Pakistan-China nexus. This is a subject which is the peak of everybody, in fact, in the Western media, in all kind of discussion we hear. What actually is the capability of PLA? And as you know, very little is known about apart from what PLA wants to reveal about itself. On June 15th, as a deadly clash broke out between PLA and Indian Army soldiers at Galwan in the Ladakh Valley, India-China's bilateral relationship touched a new low. The PLA became the epicenter of strategic debate and scholarly discussions. Ever since the LSE has been tensed, both sides bolstered the infrastructure, both on terms of soldiers and other equipment. There have been heavy deployment, and despite the disengagement process, which all of you saw on TV, the situation is far from normal and there is immense trust deficit. Let there be no doubt that the Chinese leadership cannot be trusted. People's Republic of China is going to be a cause of regional disequilibrium, and it is therefore important for strategic community in India, including the young students, to be better informed about PLA's capability and China-Pakistan nexus. Who better than General KJ Singh to educate us about this topic? Without much ado, I now hand over the proceedings to General KJ Singh. Over to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Good morning and Jai Hind, everybody. Especially thank you to Colonel Deepak Joshi, Director of the school, Professor Divya Malhotra, Shekhar Adhikari, my dear students, and Rahul, who started these proceedings. It is my great privilege. I consider myself lucky to be invited by this emerging university, RRU, which is emerged as leading kind of a medium to articulate on defense and strategic affairs. And they have given me a very topical subject. Most of you know about what I'm going to say. But China is one subject on which we need to repeat, because firstly, repetitivity is poor. There are names and other issues. And it is good to repeat certain things because that solidifies our learning. So let me talk about PLA capabilities and Pak-China nexus. I'll divide it into two parts. First, I'll touch upon the capabilities, and then I'll go to the nexus part. So when we started these, Colonel Deepak Joshi told us that we are going to talk about People's Liberation Army, PLA. But is it Liberation Army? Or the first question that should come to your mind is it party? Because, see, this army was set up even the People's Republic of China was set up. The party, China Communist Party, came up in 1921. It's very important in Chinese context and in matters relating to China to keep a track of dates and years. So 1921, CCP came into existence. And the People's Republic of China was formed on 1949. But 8 years after the party was formed, there was Nanyang uprising, and People's Liberation Army was formed in 1929. One question which can come to our mind is, what is it liberating now? What liberation is it doing? That time, liberation was against Chiang Kai-shek. Now, are they going to liberate some territories they lay claims to? Because China says that it is being deprived of territories by colonial powers, and it paints itself as a victim. And it says like China extends the left hand, it's the palm, and 5 include Ladakh, Nepal, Bhutan, Sikkim, and Arunachal. So now, is this PLA going to be used for that purpose? So keep this question with you and take into account the fact that it is really party's liberation army. It's not People's Liberation Army. And while the motto is serve the people, but party commands the gun. Have no doubt about that. Because Mao said in 1929, was set up in Kuktian, the role of the military is to chiefly serve political ends. I repeat, the role of the to chiefly serve political ends, not people's ends. And more recently, in 2019, the President Xi, who combines the powers of Chairman of Central Military Commission, General Secretary of CC, and the President of PRC, he made an interesting remark. He said, PLA still remains the party's army and must maintain absolute, I repeat, absolute loyalty to the political masters, So we are looking at an army which is called People's Liberation Army, but actually Party's Liberation Army. And what is it liberating? That is the question we must keep thinking about. Now, this army, when it came up during Mao's time, was made attritionist mode. It was a huge, big army, more than 3 lakh people in that, and it was some sort of getting the cadres into some kind of a uniform. But somewhere in the time of Deng Xiaoping, in 90s, they decided to change their term of reference to local wars under modern conditions or high-tech conditions, which has further been refined now because China realizes that information warfare is indeed the new form of warfare. So currently it is local wars under information live conditions. So that is the mission of this armed forces. It is transiting to that. So from attrition, it is converting to modernization. And like I told you, it was at one stage 4.5 million till 1980s, 45 lakhs people. It has come down to about 2.3 or 23 lakhs. Some people say 2.185, about 22 lakhs. But the target is to cut down to 2 million. That is the target. And it has a reserve of 1.17 million people. Besides that, it has got border defense regiments and other ancillaries, border police. So there is no way you can really find out what kind of people or cadres or what kind of soldiers can be mobilized by China. It is anybody's guess because opacity is the norm over there. It is also going through corrupt people are being weeded out. Under Chairman Xi or President Xi, 50 generals and 3,000 other middle rank officers have been sacked. So was it such a corrupt army? Was it so PLA in a system like Communist China? Or is it some means to weed out uncomfortable people? Well, the answer may be in both these points. That it may be partially weeding out corruption, but also throwing out people. That may be second agenda in this. It is the largest in the world. It has got the second biggest budget after America. It is also probably the second most powerful. There are some websites which says it is most powerful, but that's not. It is behind USA by couple of steps on the ladder. If I was to take it USA on top of the ladder, then I will not be able to put my estimation. That's my estimation only. It can be questioned. You are welcome to, as students and researchers, you must objectively keep questioning what is being stated. I would be able to put it 4 or 5 rungs below. And especially in the domain of Air Force and Navy. In the naval domain, it could be very close to where Indian Navy is. Well, it's a statement I'm making which is open to question. So potency of this army or armed forces it needs to be validated. Why? I will tell you later. I'll do another and I will bring back the point once again. Particularly the Navy. Currently, it has got aircraft carriers that it is trying to induct. There is a story which you may like to go to Google and read about induction of Liaoning. Liaoning is the first aircraft carrier which PLA Navy is inducting. Interesting part is in PLA, thing has got Army as a prefix. PLA Ground Forces, PLA Air Force, PLA Navy. It's something like this. Liaoning was lying in a harbor in Black Sea and it was discarded and it was given up for about a decade or so and Chinese bought it and towed it and said that it is going to become an amusement. The whole world watched it being towed. It couldn't come through Suez. It came around Cape of Good Hope over the South Africa, open to scrutiny. What satellites? Everybody saw it with naked eyes. It came all the way to China. And after a towing journey which was long, and everybody was explained it is going to become an amusement park. And now, couple of years later, it is being fielded as an aircraft carrier. Has it succeeded? Not as yet. I put it to you that aircraft carriers, to operate aircrafts from the carriers, you need domain competence of minimum 6 to 8 years. You can't do it by just switching on a switch like, and I will start flying. No, it can't happen. It requires tremendous amount of experience. So, China has not yet gathered it. That's why I say Chinese Navy is somewhere close to Indian Navy. I'll put it there. Now let's look at the structures of this forces. Like I told you, this is parties armed forces. So you have Central Military Commission. The head of that is President Xi. He, incidentally, I told you, is also General Secretary of the party and chairman of CMC and is president of China. So he heads the CMC as chairman. And the defense minister of China is a gentleman called as Wang Fenghe. He has got a background of 2nd Artillery. I'll tell you about 2nd Artillery just after a while, and then you'll realize the importance of what he brings to the table, what kind of competence he brings to the table. Be wrong. When we look at our Raksha Ministries, what kind of competence we want from them? Can they bring that kind of competence? Because he has the 2nd Artillery, which is a theater command of Chinese army. He knows all about the missiles. Let me tell you now only. He knows all about conventional, strategic, nuclear, and all kinds of missiles. And he has background of 30 odd years in armed forces. So he is the defense minister. So that is also a part of the problem that democracies face. I'm not saying our system is wrong, but our system has got its limitations, which need to be flagged. Can they be removed? That's a moot question. So PLA has got, PLA has recently been modernized or reorganized. It was about 2.5 years back. Now it's got 5 different wings. It has got ground forces, which is equivalent of our army. It has got Navy. It has got Air Force. But besides these 3, it has also got rocket force. What was earlier called as 2nd Artillery, and which is a force which is equivalent of our Strategic Forces Command. What we have for missiles and all, but all conventional missiles are also placed over there. So it's the rocket force, and the defense minister has headed that force. And then there is something very interesting, very unique. It is called Strategic Support Force, which includes cyber, space, and such emerging domains. So let me repeat. We all know about ground forces, Navy and Air Force, no laboring over it. But what their reputation is that think of our own armed forces. Do we have a rocket force? No, we don't. We have Strategic Forces Command, but it has to be compared and thought of. Then they have a Strategic Support Force, which includes cyber and space, emerging domains. So when this reorganization was done, there was accretion in maritime domain, missiles, the fact that their defense minister is ex-chief of 2nd Artillery, so you know where the focus is, space, cyber, and technology. Basically, artificial intelligence and disruptive technologies. That is where China wants to go. So China had 17 theaters, like they have 17 commands. You know, Army's got 7 commands, Air Force has got 7 commands, and there are 3 commands. We have got 17 regional commands. So China had 17 theaters. They cut it down to 5 theaters 2 years back. And which are these 5 theaters? This is important. Students must know it. There is this Eastern Theater, which is at Nanjing. faces Taiwan and East China Sea. And believe you me, for China, the most important frontier is eastern frontier. We may think that it is most important, but no, that is the most important. The second frontier is southeastern frontier, which is located at Guangzhou and which faces Vietnam, Southeast Asian countries, and South China Sea. And that is the second most important frontier for them. And third important frontier for them is Western Theater, which concerns us. It is based at Chengdu in Tibet. It looks after Tibet, Xinjiang. Basically, they're autonomous regions. And it has got 76 and 77 core. It's easy to remember 77, lucky 7 twice. I hope it's not against us. For China, we have to somehow control it. 76 and 77 cores are there in that, just to remember. Because remember, Chinese figures is difficult. Because starting from east, they've got 71, 72, 73. In southeast, they've got 74, 75, 76, 77 opposite us. And in north, which is at Shenyang, which faces Russia, Manchuria, Korea, they've got 78, 79. And then their mostest important theater. I told you, eastern is more important, southwest is next, western is third, but the most important for them is central, which is Beijing. And they've got 3 cores in that. So they've got 81, 82, 83, 3 cores in that. And it's like Beijing. They've got 84 core size formations. 13 are operational, rest are static combination. And when we talk of personalities, let us remember, we've heard of one, this name Zhao Zongqi, the person who was Western Theater commander when we had problem in Vietnam and we had problem in Kazan. It's very difficult to remember Chinese name, but I have my own memory peg. I say Zhao, Zhao is his Gaya, Zhao Zhao, and Zongqi. Zongqi rhymes with an animal. I don't want to name the animal, but Zong and that animal, the last part, I remember it, Zongqi. So, Zhao Zongqi. He traveled a hell of a lot, he's gone now. Well, he was in Western Theater Command for nearly his lifetime. And he spent 3-4 decades over there. Who replaced him? He was replaced by Zhang Zudong. Ding dong, I want to remember like that. Zhang Zudong. He came in December, and surprisingly, this July, he's been thrown out. And nothing is known about him. Why has he been thrown out? Corruption, unsuitability, and we may not find out for many years. And we may never find out. That's any system. So who's come in his place? The current Western Theater commander is Zhu Qiling. So killing is something which can easy to remember. He's come for some killing. So Zhu Qiling was appointed in July 21. So if you have to remember theaters and personalities, we have Western Theater against us, 76 and 77 core, which is based at Chengdu, and it is now being commanded by Zhu Qiling. And this is very good optimization for China. Earlier, China used to have military regions, large number of them. I told you 17 of them. So they used to take forces from Xinjiang military region, which was based in Lanzhou. They used to take forces from Tibet military region, which was based in Chengdu, and they also used to take forces from Guangzhou military region. 3 regions they used to pull out forces to take care of problems in Tibet and Xinjiang. Currently, they have simplified that. They have 2 cores, 76 and 77, which takes this challenge for them. Now let's come to my statement that I said, that about the potency of PLA army. I'll make some statements. You are welcome to examine them, but don't go by Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is an open source and Chinese writers go and keep editing it. See, China fought a war with Soviets and Uzbekistan for 7 months. It fought in 70s. What was the outcome of that war? China didn't win it. I must say this. So, did Soviets win it? I will not answer that. You please find out yourself. But Soviets had an upper. This I say for sure. They fought a year-long war in 78 and 79 against Vietnam. Did Vietnam win it? No, probably not. Did China win it? Certainly not. I'll repeat, China certainly not win it. Vietnam probably won it. I'll say like this, because China had to retreat. So, if China did not win against Soviets in Usuri River in 70s, did not win in 80s against Vietnam in 78, 79, it showed hesitancy to go to Afghanistan. In UN peacekeeping in Sudan, its contingent was criticized for some kind of hesitancy, cowardice, reticence, whatever word you want to use. But it didn't respond. It didn't take action. Then come closer to India in our context. At Nathula in 1967, read about this. Nathula Chola. We had casualties, I accept, close to 300, but China had more than 800. So please look at that. And we did not yield ground. And after that, we have never yielded ground. In Sundrongchu in 1988 and Doklam in 2017. Actually, see, it is called Dolam Plateau. When I was in Sikkim Corps Commander, Bhutanese and Indians call it Dolam. But the way Chinese are, their Sai warfare, currently now everybody calls it Doklam. That is the Chinese name. And after a couple of years, people will say, it has got a Chinese name, so it must be Chinese. So I don't know what to say out of this. There is also, in current Ladakh crisis, there is a stalemate. Who started this problem? China. If you so-called emerging power, you say that global power, and you start an issue, and you do not resolve it, then are you the winner? Stalemate a victory for one who initiates it at a time when pandemic is raging. Well, you have to find answers yourself. What are the trends about this armed forces? There is a lot of hype technology. We were told microwave ovens will fry Indians if they try to go to Kailash range. We were told about artificial intelligence. We were told about swarms of drones will come, which are delivering noodles to their soldiers. Now they'll come with bombs, like on Jammu airport, and bomb our positions. Has anything like that happened? Well, no, nothing like that has happened. Either there is a limitation of altitude, technological limitation, or Chinese have not yet operationalized that capability. Am I saying become complacent? No. I am saying vigilant. But my main point is, don't be scared. Let that capability manifest itself. You work overtime to take care of it. But my theme in my articles has been, Chinese are not 10 feet tall. In Sikkim, I have faced them. I have faced them on the Himachal border, and we've had patrol standoffs. And allow me to tell you, in each of those standoffs, we have come out better. So let's not get psyched into believing that Chinese are 10 feet tall. No, they are not. They also have a habit of hyping up. Like when Chinese got T-59 tanks, they were actually T-54, copies of Russian T-54 tanks. But why did they choose to call it T-59? That is their mentality. Now they've got a Type 99 tank. But what is equal to T-90 and little less than that? Then why call it Type 99? That is their philosophy. That you operate numbers, you sight the other person. Basically, their equipment is evolutionary in nature. This much now touted tank Type 15, which is being fielded, and whole world is going gaga about, it is not even a medium tank. It weighs 34 tons. Actually, an evolutionary tank, which is modification of T-34 they used to have. And world over, no light tank weighs more than 28 tons. Moment you weigh more than 28 tons, you can't call yourself light tank. But Chinese choose to call it. And they've taken shortcuts. They've increased the track weight. They've done a couple of things to keep their tanks mobile in that terrain. So good luck to them. But be careful about what they say. It's not something, all of it is not true. You will read that they have mastered stealth technology, they've done this. but it needs to be validated. When we research about China, because we have students who are into this domain, we must read about unrestricted warfare. This is a book written by 2 Air Force senior colonels. The translations are available. There are explanatory versions also available. This was written by 2 colonels, senior colonels, because they have a rank of senior colonel equivalent to our brigadier, Kyo Lang and Wang Zai Zungzi in 1999. It is using politics, legal. China has an interesting term called as lawfare. We have warfare, they have lawfare. They intelligently or manipulate the treaties. China is past master in manipulation of treaties, disowning treaties. Like this treaty on Tibet, they said we only initialed it. We are not party to it. So wherever it suits them, they disown a treaty. And like protocols with us, signed in 2014, 93, 96 for border peace and tranquility, confidence building measures, all have been violated in this current round. So they talk of, and they are masters. They can produce maps like 9 dashes line from anywhere. They can pull it out literally like a magician out of their hat. So like this Doklam crisis is centered on where is Mount Gipmochi. We say it is along Merugla Simche, and China says it is otherwise. So they are cartographic manipulators, and they talk of economic warfare. And they are now propagating a theory of 3 warfares. Now these warfares are basically public opinion warfare, which is propaganda, psychological warfare, like name a tank P-59, even when it is than P-54, call it Type 99 when it is T-90, without imaginary claims like 9 dashes line. So, it's psychological warfare and legal warfare. And the prime example is articles which appeared before in the dark crisis, before we went, that microwaves will fry you, swarms of drones will come. Did anything like that happen? So they are experts in this. So I have given you some process about PLA. Do look into this aspect, and I'll quickly repeat some of them. Is it People's Army or political army? Who controls it? What is it trying to liberate? Go into aspects of their theaterization vis-a-vis how we face them. We have Northern Command, Central Command, Command. They have just Western Theater Command. Look at the aspect of their hyping on aspects of lawfare, cartography, and psychological warfare. Our personality is important for them. And don't get overawed by Chinese. I have given you examples, and I have given you things which you need to research. But don't take them complacency also, please. That is why we are suffering in Ladakh. We probably took them at face value. So we can't take them at face value. We can't trust them. We can only trust them after verification and re-verification. Let me now go into the second important, because we have that much of time only, about nexus and collusivity with Pakistan. We Indians have short memories. We forget. If you go to Naga insurgency and you go to 1950s, 51, 52, where did the Naga insurgents go? General Mobu Angami. He came to East Pakistan and then he later escaped to China. And they, all of them found shelter in China. China equipped them, China armed them. Okay, so all our insurgent troops in Northeast have received sustenance from China. There's a border town called as Ruili. It is like Dara Adam Khel in Northwest Frontier Province. Weapons are available there. It's a place where people go and launder their money. And currently, all fugitive leaders are hiding over there. Paresh Barua, Phunthing Shimran of NCNI, Anthony Shimre, all are sitting there. So China shields them. And Pakistan was doing it in collusivity. East Pakistan was part of this. Thank God, in 1971, it became Bangladesh. And this problem has got reduced to certain extent of they being sheltered in Bangladesh. Paresh Barua and all these people, Anup Chetia, were thrown out from there by Sheikh Hasina Wajid. I salute her. She is one lady who has helped the cause of addressing insurgency in Northeast to a great extent. My great salute to her and her support for rooting out terrorism. In 1963, Pakistan gave China huge big tract of land, strategic peace, right next to Siachen, Daulat Beg Oldie, and joining abutting Aksai Chin. And today its utility is become great because of fresh water source. If you have to set up silicon chip industry, it is ideal place. China was gifted this by Pakistan. And thereafter, Pakistan indulged in midwifery, became a midwife for Kissinger and Nixon. In July 71, Kissinger flew to China from Pakistan. Later, Nixon went in February 72, and they became, and now America realizes they've been taken for a ride by China. They thought that this democratization and market economy will make China democratic, but that has not happened. China used free market capital economy, and it has kept communism in place. And today it is telling the world that we have lifted 70 crore people, 700 million out of poverty. Is there any other example in the world? They are counting it as an alternative model of governance. But to be fair to Chinese, they did not intervene in 1965 war. They did not intervene in 71 wars. Even in Kargil, where the telephonic conversation between President Pervez Musharraf and his chief of general staff had got leaked from Beijing, they only voted India, and they only consulted when Nawaz Sharif went there, but they did not take any precipitate action. So there was a feeling that China, if Pakistan does something on Indian border, China may not intervene because China may not want to open another front. And there was China does something to India, Pakistan will definitely try to do some trouble, but China may know them back and tell them that we'll sort out India on our own. So these kind of situations were there. But we have a lifetime of two-front deployment. Currently, we reorbited one core from Pakistan border to China border. So it is at some cost. That's how it had to be done. Current status of their nexus is there is this huge big opportunity of fresh water in Sakshagam Valley and Chin for silicon chips. China Park CPEC, China Park Economic Corridor is a medium where nexus has become very. Brothers are becoming steel brothers. Dams are being made on Kohala and Dasu. So all these dams are coming up. Security of these people is being done by Pak Army. The management of CPEC is also being done by Pak Army General Salim Bajwa. Are being given to the Foundation, Special Organization of Pak Army veterans, Pak Armed Forces veterans, Frontier Works Organization, something like our. So Pak Army is deeply into CPEC. So there is this nexus which gets leveraged from there. Pak Army is also reportedly a deal-sized force for security to Chinese workers. But there are concerns. Currently, there is a problem also. 9 Chinese engineers lost their life when they were working for Dasu Hydel project. So there are issues. China and Pakistan are able to collude very well, and I must compliment them in terms of technology transfer for arms. Norinco, which is Northern Industrial Corporation China, has tied up with heavy industries Takshila, outfit for making tanks and ordnance factory Wah and aviation complex Kamran. So China is into making tanks in Pakistan. It is also making aircraft, JF-17, and they are also supplying it to Nigeria and Myanmar. So whereas our ordnance factories are lagging behind, Pakistan ordnance factories have really colluded with China and have managed to get hold of transfer of technology. Russia gave us TOT, and even we got a TOT for Bofors, but our ordnance factories sat on it, and they did not leverage it properly. But Pakistan, in my appreciation, has done a better job of it, and in collusion with China, and they are supplying arms all around India, to Bangladesh, to Myanmar, to Nepal, to Sri Lanka. They even were giving to Maldives. Now it is stopped. So if that is happening, then what happens? Chinese engineers and technicians can be there for maintenance and also for spy. And Pakistanis work with them. So Pakistan can also make it. So there is a very worrying, we talk of pearl of things. You know, China has got bases around India, starting from Djibouti in our African coast, going on Gwadar now in Pakistan, coming on to Hambantota in Sri Lanka, going on to Koko, to Kyukku in Myanmar, for Kra Canal in Thailand. All these places they are trying to make bases. Some are there coming up. So if that be so, isn't there another complementary string which is getting formed by supply of arms, joint production, and servicing and maintenance? And what is stopping India? We've also got Russian arms. We can also service them. Why haven't we done it? This is the question we need to ask ourselves. As researchers and thinkers, we need to articulate these concerns. That if China can do it, why have India has got huge big talent pool of ex-CME, DRDO people? Why can't, after all, we went to Sri Lanka and did demining operations. Our engineers, personnel went. Why isn't there such a collaboration being planned? And why don't we go to Bangladesh and Afghanistan and Sri Lanka and service their equipment? It's Russian origin. We know that equipment. So how to mitigate this nexus between? Well, one way some people form alliances like Quad and all, but alliances can only be diplomatic, can be show of force. Nobody will put boots on ground. Nobody will do a dirty job. That you will have to do it yourself. So we have to do rebalancing. Some of rebalancing has already taken place. A core size formation has been reorbited from west borders to northern border. A division which was deployed in J&K has gone to Ladakh, south of Pangong Tso, uniform force. It is in media. I am not giving any secret information. A division which was to fight Pakistan is now in central sector. It's also given in media. And 17 corps, a mountain corps or mountain strike corps which had come up and which had unwieldy charter of looking after from Leh to Arunachal has now been rationalized to look after only after what is Sikkim, Arunachal, and other parts have been given different reserves. Over here, I think I am finishing my time, and we must have some time for questions. So I must quickly recap what I have tried to put it across to you. That is to re-emphasize the point that Chinese army is a party's army, party controls the gun, and Xi has said it recently. An army which is trying to move from attrition to modernization, cut down manpower. Its potency, in my perception, is questionable into 5 components. And important components are rocket and strategic support forces, trying to address Tibet through Western theater, 2 core size formations. Its performance on an appraisal on it doesn't give too much of confidence. It has had problems on Soviet Vietnam, and it has shown hesitancy to go to UN missions. Now, Afghanistan, will it get involved in Afghanistan? And will China learn that lesson which was learned by Britain, which was learned by Russians, that nobody can tame Afghanis. I hope China makes this mistake. And instead of outsourcing it to Pakistan, tries to get puts its boots on ground and gets a tight one on its face and realizes the limitation of overseas deployment, because you cannot solve all problems by physically going there. To that extent, China is investing in disruptive technologies, artificial intelligence, and if India and China ever have the next round of exchange, don't get surprised if it is in the domain of cyber. It is already happening, I believe, in certain, the electric grid which was put off-road. Some people say a couple of years, some people say it was Chinese venture. Uh, it is a tendency for legal warfare, cartographic warfare. You must read about three warfare. The history between Pakistan and China collision is very long. They call themselves Iron Brothers, and they say we are higher than Himalaya, deeper than oceans. And this has got basically driven by enemy of my enemy. But sad that it is there, and we have to face it. And CPEC is making challenges worse for us. And you all have to look at rebalancing options which India has exercised. With this, I think I have exceeded my time by 2-3 minutes, and I have just about 10-12 minutes for questions and summing up. So may I now hand you over back to Rahul so that questions can be added to me. I'll try to answer them to best of my capabilities. If some questions are not covered, please feel free to give it to Professor Divya Malhotra. She can email it to me, and I'll try and give you answers to those questions. Some answers I may not have to do. So I'll do some reading and research and give those answers. Thank you. I've enjoyed this interaction and look forward to question answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant General KJ Singh. Thank you so much for taking us through this historical journey of how this China-Pak nexus came into being, and then finally building a linkage with the contemporary relevance of how events are unfolding. So now I may request our audience to ask the questions. They can ask directly or they can put it in the chat box. If somebody wants to ask directly to the speaker, please feel free to ask.
Rahul, it may become a
yes,
many, so you may read the chat box questions, or okay, whichever way. Go ahead.
Yes,
Yeah, somebody is there. Please.
Professor Adhikari, please, sir.
Yeah, sir. First of all, I would like to thank you for your excellent research-oriented lecture. Man, you talked about PLA. Nobody knows about PLA as a tool, political tool. That is something new to the researcher, while they think that it is a People Liberation Army. Here, what I would like to make my observation in just a few for 1-2 minutes, that let's see, you talk of you took this Chinese history from 1921 and till recently. You will see the law of the philosophy, the Chinese philosophy of war was based on the law of contradiction, that is offense and defense. When we talk of offense and defense, prior to independence, Chinese independence, Chinese philosophy of war was a defensive, offensive one. That is guerrilla warfare supported by regular warfare. And in due course, they won the war, and that is why the credit goes to the People Liberation Army. After that, why this happened? Because China at the time was not an industrialized state, it was only an agricultural state. After industrialization, you will see a different change in the scenario in Chinese PLA. That is, we think in terms of regular army becoming more and more important force and regular forces going into the background. So one important aspect, I think very important for the researchers, from the researchers' point of view, that is there. Then you talk of as a political tool party, that's very good. Then you talk of Eastern Frontier. Eastern Frontier, sir, what do you mean by Eastern Frontier is more important than the Western other frontier you have mentioned? what I think that Eastern frontiers are important because the crust of today's politics is on Indo-Pacific region. And here, the Chinese, they want to maintain their supremacy in South China Sea, and that is why they want that eastern frontier should be more solid, should be more defended, they should go for an offensive. This thing. Now, my last point is that so far the Chinese-Pakistan nexus. Why Pakistan is important for China? I think that the survivability of Pakistan is very important for China to promote its interest in the here in the Asian continent or in the warm water that will connect the Central Asia and the African countries. That is very important aspect. And here we generally see that China sees Pakistan as a tool in their strategic calculation because of the economic corridor that connects Afghanistan, China, both these countries, which will enable China to compete with the superpowers, the so-called superpowers of the past. That is one important aspect. Today, when we talk of this thing, do you think, sir, that still India will be more important at the current moment than what is happening in Afghanistan? Will China, Pakistan will try to solve the Afghanistan problem rather than to engage India in such type of conflict, knowingly Pakistan knowing that China will not involve directly with India. And that has been proved in the case of Kashmir issue. I mean, whenever the Kashmir issue was came forward, was put either in United Nations or elsewhere or in this, China never supported this thing, and that China always said that it is a bilateral issue and it should be solved by this thing. So what I want to say that the PLA, why they stick to this? I mean, you refer to this thing. They should now change the name of People Liberation Army. You already liberated. China is already an independent country. Then there should be a new name, new thinking should be given to this type of old-fashioned PLA. And the second important point, which I want to, the Chinese interest in the Pacific by making their power strong in the eastern frontier. And third important point, I would like to you to throw light on that. There's the Afghanistan issue. That is very important. I mean, today, is India important or Afghanistan important in order to meet both their challenges, Afghanistan and Chinese interests? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Adhikari. Like a professor, you have really, besides asking questions, you have also educated us, which is thank you for that great education. What I would like to quickly also bring out 2-3 points which I was going to miss. One is that somewhere I missed that Chinese army is composed of conscripts. It's so the professionalism of that army has got question mark because people come for 2-3 years, 10 years, and in that much of time, even mastering technology is a challenge. Now coming to Pacific, China is beset with what is called as Malacca dilemma. All energy flow to China passes through a narrow strait of Malacca Straits, and that is dominated by India, and India sits on head of that. And China can be chewed of the energy if Malacca is cut. That's why Chinese propensity in other states like Lombok and Sunda Strait are not economically. So China is trying to make Kra Canal through Thailand, but that project is not finding traction. So it is also looking at multiple options like developing Kayakpu port in it is also trying to build up Gwadar where you have a warm water. And now I come to this question of Afghanistan. The problem is The Afghanistan issue is so complex that, Professor, I would also like China to get bogged down over it. I will not get involved. Nobody can get involved there. Nobody can intervene there. You can only get bogged down into a morasses, bogged down into a imbroglio, bogged down hopelessly. I hope China does it. I am hoping, wishing, and praying. Because China, what will try to do is, it will outsource the problem to Pakistan and get Pakistan's hands dirty. Pakistan, in any case, is their special forces and others are fighting with Taliban. But should China make that mistake, it will be great at us, because China will learn a very sad lesson which they need to learn. It is time to learn this lesson, that physical interventions have a limit. And actually in Ladakh, what they did was they felt that by coercive deployment, they'll be able to take the 1959 claim line. India will yield. Pandemic is going on. But what we did not bargain for is Galwan and Kailash quid pro quo. And both these have put question marks on resolution of that problem. So my appreciation is that Ladakh problem will linger. Sumdrong Chu was resolved after 7-8 years. This will also not get resolved. We have to think long term. We have to, as researchers, defense analysts, people who teach studies, we must educate our public not to put unrealistic expectations on our government. We should, our Indians are 2-minute Maggi noodle variety of thinking. It will not get resolved. We have to think like Chinese. It will take 7-8 years, in my appreciation, to resolve like Sundram. It will not be easy. And we have to stand our ground. And my feeling is that while China may be tempted to go to Afghanistan, hedge its bets, because it's very light problem of dealing with Uyghurs. And in case it intervenes in China, then Taliban, if it intervenes against Taliban, there is a problem, because Uyghurs will get support from Taliban. If it intervenes for Taliban, again there is a problem, because Tajik, Hazaras and Uzbeks, they will gang up together, Ismailis. And incidentally, Uyghurs are more sort of their Turkic origin, so they will affinity with those people. So either way, China is in for trouble now in that issue. It has to carefully, but Chinese have got very beautiful weapon which works in Afghanistan, which is called bakshish, bribery. It has worked last time also. Warlords were bought. They all have a price, and will China apply that tool? And how much that tool will succeed? These are questions. All answers can't be found today. But let us, they say a good question should not be answered. It should be allowed to linger, like, and it becomes even better, gives you more answers to the question itself. So, Professor, may I suggest that we leave it like a fermented wine, and our students will find many more answers. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thanks, sir.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So we have a few more questions from our students. So first is from Isha Sharma, sir. So when it comes to China's hardcore capabilities or the kind of force projection they do, is it real, or is it a kind of a deception which is done by Chinese? And how can India counter this kind of a psychological warfare?
China will not let fight at all, because in Ladakh also China is very scared of attacks. It has got one child now, and it is not it's unlike Indians, they can't take too many casualties. In Sudan also, UN intervention, Chinese didn't even stir the camp. So that problem China has. Ideally, I would like to first use politics, economic, like it is telling India that you leave this border problem to be resolved later. Let's look at trade. Otherwise, it has got huge big leverages. Even our pharmaceutical ingredients, API, are sourced from China. So China would first like to apply leverages politics and economic. It will also apply psychological, it will apply cartographic manipulation and legal warfare. The template, you see it all over in the world. You've seen it in South China Sea, you've seen it in Ladakh, it has happened on Kazakh borders, not reported so much. It's not as if they have problem only against us. They have problems with Bhutan, they also have problems with Nepal. People don't talk, people yield ground. That is the sad. So what China will do is, it will like to do coercive posturing, like what it did in Ladakh. And it will try to take the warfare into cyber domain, into disruptive technologies. And it may not want to fight the actual war. That is where we have to look for, read the situation and take our actions accordingly. I hope I have answered your question partially. I am not a Chinese, so I cannot tell you what Chinese actually do.
Yes. So another
I
question
can
from
guess it.
Nisha. Yes. Yes. So another question from Nisha Jadeja, sir. She asked that is there a provision where the Uyghur Muslims can serve in the PLA, sir?
They take it in very small numbers. What China is doing, China, I would recommend all of you read about China's autonomous regions. China has 5 autonomous regions, which is one is Manchuria, which is Mongolian, kind of a Mongolian inner Mongolia sort of region. It has got Xinjiang, which is Uyghurs. It's got Tibet. It's got regions are there. It has got one in the South Guangzhou side, which is the enemy border. So these 5 autonomous regions they've got. Now, they are geography of these autonomous regions. They are doing what is called as Hanization. They are treating these regions with harms, controlling the economic trade and education and other things. So, and they are re-educating the population. Certain number of people they are trying to take for like use Special Frontier Force, which made out of Tibetans. When we occupied Kailash range, we used these troops. We have this, which is Vikas. Vikasis are special force India has got, which is got only Tibetan ranks, troops. So China has also now learned a lesson from us, and China, I believe, is going to raise units based on these people. But I assure you that even if it takes these people, they will put large number of yes, because it doesn't trust people of these ethnicities, and it only take those who have been re-educated, who have been brainwashed, and who are also continuously monitored. But there is bar for Uyghurs to serve in Chinese army. But then, unlike Indian army, it's not a democracy. Only party rights who will serve in the army and can throw out anybody without any reason. See, Zhu Xinjiang, who was the commander, took over in December. July he sacked, and in 7 months, and nobody talks about it. We don't know why has he gone. So it's their party that decides who will serve for how long. Thank you. I hope I have answered your question, but interesting question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So another question is from Pawan Chudasma. So he asked that is India changing its approach towards the disputed border with China? And adding to that, when we see that whenever there is a balancing effort, so there is generally a sort of a trust deficit among the key actors. So can India really rely on USA when it comes to countering China?
See, I would recommend to people of your generation. My generation grew up with a very wrong format. In 1962, Pandit Nehru was cornered in parliament, and he was told that Aksai Chin is under Chinese occupation, China has made a rule. So, that why are you talking of Aksai Chin? Not even a blade of grass grows there. Bhai Mahavir, who was from Socialist Party, who had raised this question, he told him, Nehru ji, this is just a little joke which happened in parliament. I am quoting rephrasing. He said, Nehruji, nothing grows on your head also. You are bald. Does that mean we should leave your head also? Give it away. So that time Nehruji committed not even an inch of territory, not even 1 inch we will give to China. That was a very unreasonable kind of a declaration. I think that time we should have resolved it with China. That time Chinese demands were not very aggressive. China was ready to barter with Arunachal. And see, all these claim lines are very questionable. There are large number of claim lines. There is McCartney-MacDonald line. There is Johnson-Ardagh line. There is 1959 claim line. There is this McMahon line. So there are claim lines and claim lines. Nobody knows which claim lines is real. Somebody says it is as per Kunlun mountain range. Some is Himalayan watershed. Nobody's marked it. It was not even marked on British maps. So it will be pragmatic in my view. And I am sorry, pardon me, against Chinese. I was in Indian Army for 40 years, but I am pragmatic. We should find resolution by give and take. Not take this line कि मेरी मातृभूमि की 1 इंच भी नहीं दूंगा. This will not work because that is your matrubhumi. This is also questionable. You can make a claim. So China make a claim. So it will be a good idea to sit down in a spirit of give and take, resolve the issues if they can be resolved. Because currently also we are having a concept of buffer zones where we also don't, in that area they also don't patrol. I hope this holds because see, basically Britishers created this problem for us. They wanted Tibet to be buffer between India and China. So they promoted a concept of sovereignty. Sovereignty is not sovereignty, but it is halfway between sovereignty and autonomy or freedom. The Tibet is the term of China. In Chinese language, there is no term known as suzerainty. They don't have a concept of suzerainty. They have a concept of either total occupation or ignoring. They don't even say free. So they were not ready to ignore Tibet. You know, Tibet had even ruled parts of China. Tibet was never under China properly. But Britishers made it under Chinese suzerainty. And because of that, then when China annexed Tibet, we did nothing. So buffer had vanished. Now there is no buffer. So then there is a problem. We have to sort of somehow come to borders. Good fences make good neighbors. Without that, there can't be a resolution. My advice to this generation is, if China gives us a pragmatic deal, if China is willing to give and take, make some concessions, we can make some, it may be a better idea. This is my, I am in a hopeless minority on this because it is sacrilege to say that I'll give up our territory. But a territory where nothing grows, where it is glaciated, where there is no population, allow me through you to appeal. You all live in Gujarat. I would request all of you that you all go on excursions, go to these border areas and spend some time there. Do some NGO activity there. I know you have borders in Kutch. I have served there, I have visited there. I have been to Bhet, I have been to Kanjarkot, Vigukot, India Bridge, Allah, Ban. I have seen all that area. But there are areas in Sikkim, in Ladakh, in Arunachal. Please go there. There are ghost villages. Nobody stays there. There's no education there. So, if there are areas in our country like that, it is our duty to connect with them and to bring them. This is my submission.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So another set of questions, sir. This is regarding if you can highlight the policy of China, which is basically dealing with the arms proliferation in South Asia, and what can India do to counter such Chinese move? So the second is related to the Article 370, sir, and how it has, you know, created such conditions to deepen the China-Pak nexus.
Firstly, I take the arms proliferation. Arms proliferation is in the two domains. One is the nuclear, and second is in the conventional weapons. In nuclear domain, China has been most irresponsible. It has proliferated and given the nuclear technology to Pakistan, and it has created a problem for the world. From Pakistan, some of that technology found its way to even Iran, and it has come through the North Korean conduit. So it's a very dangerous, irresponsible, and very sad thing which Chinese have done. But who can check China? They've done it. Now they are to that extent that whenever India is given anything or to be given anything, China puts a condition that Pakistan should also be given the same, which may not be possible. So here is one problem China has created in the nuclear domain for the entire, and it has put a nuclear weapon in a very unstable region of Pakistan. As regards small arms, again China is, I would say, very responsible. Really, I told you in Myanmar, in Kunming province, please go to Google, check it out. Kunming province is a border town. It is Darra Adam Khe, which is on northwest province. All kinds of weapons are available there, and all these insurgent groups, northeast, in Myanmar, in even in Bangladesh, and even in Marxist left-wing extremism areas, Maoists, even in Nepal, and buy it from there. So, and there are published reports. People have been caught, and Pakistan have been including in this. So, proliferation of these weapons to insurgent groups spreading terrorism is a very, very dangerous phenomenon. That needs to be put an end to. Be disciplined on this. Wonderful question. I hope you write some articles and bring this issue to fore. Do some research on this. Your second question regarding Article 370. See, Article 370 had to go. But what has happened is, somewhere, Allah pardon me to say this because I'm being bold. I don't know whether I should be bold or not, but academic discussions, we should put across such points. And after all, everybody makes a mistake. Some India has made a mistake by aggressively claiming that we will bring back POJK, Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and POAC, Pakistan occupied, or COAC, China occupied Aksai Chin. And there have been people holding seminars and discussions. It was even said in Parliament. I think it is avoidable because by separating Union territory of Ladakh, which had to be separated, somewhere China is now staked a claim. China says we have to also become a party to the dispute because Aksai Chin is theirs. They have taken over. So there are issues, there are problems. We have problems of Aksai Chin. We have problems of alignment of CPEC. We have problems of Indus Water Treaty and Brahmaputra because some part of Indus upper riparian is China, even in Brahmaputra. There are issues and they have to be somehow handled with maturity. I have a request, a submission. Few things should not be said in public domain. There's no need to use it for internal domestic politics. If we have to liberate Aksai Chin, can we do it? Do we have the capability? No. We need, China is far, far ahead of us in comprehensive national power. In GDP terms, 5 times us. In defense budget, they spend 5 to 6 times more than us. Can we cope up? Can we recapture? Is it like Kargil, the way we threw out Pakistanis? No, it's not possible. So what can we do? We can follow the maxim of Deng Xiaoping, the famous Chinese wise man, who's not being followed by China today. Xi Jinping has discarded his philosophy, which is fact, which is hide your shine, bide your time. You build your capability. 3 decades later, you may outrank China. You may build that capability to get back Aksai. Do we have to get it today? Do we have to go around shouting in the world that we will liberate it? Well, my answer is we don't have to. We have to remain circumspect. If we have to deal with China, let's deal with China with maturity, not unnecessary fronts. Handling 2 fronts is a problem which was the issue today. I open few other fronts. I hope I've answered question Jadeja. I didn't get the first part of your name, Chudasma. First 2 questions were by Jadeja Isha, and second question was by Chudasma. Third question. So people who question you, you have to remember their names. Thank you.
Yes, so there's one more question by Molly and Kinley Wangchuk. So this is regarding the. Hello, so am I audible?
Fully.
Yes, sir. So this is regarding, sir, the recent key military debate in Indian domain, sir. This is regarding the theaterization and where we are trying to build this integrated commands. So what kind of impact it will have on India's military capabilities vis-a-vis China?
Well, this is something we should have done after Kargil, 20 years back. Integration, jointness, you have better response, like China has better theater command. My feeling or my advice is, let us do it sort of not in a hurry. Let us take 2 theaters opposite China, because eastern northeast is totally different from the central sector and the northern sector, Ladakh and up to UP. So let's try and make 2 theaters initially, then we can merge them if we have to. But we should, because see, in order to find the best or perfect solution, we are delaying. And we cannot, everybody in foreign countries also, like in USA, it had to come through a legislation, Nicholas Goldwater Act. UK also a legislation has to be put into place. I think our political leadership has to be complemented. PM Modi has shown great boldness, something which was 3 years and more. He declared it on 15th August of Red Fort. Now it should be taken forward, and if there are tough issues, we should resolve them. And we may not come to a perfect solution in the first formulation. We have Windows 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, 2.1, 2.2. So we may have theater format 1 now, then we can make 1.1, 2.0, and we will certainly find a perfect solution. But let us start. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. One final question from my side, sir. As we see the role of technology going in the domain of warfare, so how do you look at the adaptability, the Chinese adaptability to the same? How far they have gone to include the technology, wherein the technology is in a way trying to playing a key role in determining their tactics and operational level of war. If you can highlight on some of the recent developments, sir. I mean, your propositions, observations. Thank you.
Rahul, very good question. Chinese are good at adapting technology. We must concede it to them. They after all, they are manufacturing capital of the world. They are making these devices and all. So they have a propensity to master technology, in my appreciation. So you'll have to grant it to them. But technology has limitations in area of high altitude, in where you have adverse climate. So whether all of it can optimize in those mountains, in that kind of terrain, are questions. There are not yet proved over there. But this is a live threat. This has to be catered for. Also, we must realize that it cannot be built overnight. It requires investment. R&D budget of America is in defense is 5 times that of China. The highest is America, second is China, but China is 1/5 of America. So America invests this kind of money. That's why it has disruptive technologies. And Israel. So China is not in that league as yet. China wants to get in that league. China wants to get into those kind of technologies, but those technologies are very, they cannot be or copied so easily. Though China is trying to do that, because Chinese technology is basically if you acquire some weapons, you productionize, you adapt them, and their adaptation is very refined and nuanced art. It is imitative adaptation, it is adaptive imitation, it is disruptive imitation, it is creative adaptation. In the sense, if they suppose they take an iPad just to understand, they'll just try to make a duplicate, which is imitative. Then they will do an adaptive imitation. They'll try and do some value addition, add something to this, like a battery charger which doesn't require contact, and or something, so that value is added. So first you had imitated, then adaptive, and third they could do disruptive. They may try to make a device which fits into your pocket. Well, they will start some disruptive processes that let us try and miniaturize it or something. And finally, come to a creative imitation. They make a product which may be better than the original product. So Chinese have got these, it's a culture they have got. So technology-wise, they are a formidable nation. We have to respect that, and we have to be prepared to face them. Answers, we have to also master that. We also are an IT superpower. We have to also ramp up our capabilities and look at defensive measures. Thank you. Wonderful question.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for putting things into our perspective. I thank you, sir, for this wonderful lecture and for informing our students about the Chinese developments. Now I request our director to give a vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Rahul. It's my privilege to be giving a vote of thanks for a very nice lecture which was conducted by General KJ Singh. It was a wonderful expose on what PLA is all about. The General started with the presumption that the liberation word with the PLA itself is a misnomer, because who are they liberating? And that question which he kept was quite good. Then he went into the PLA's deception and false projection, which we all have been seeing that it is the communist way probably of functioning, where they show more than they have. And we also seen in 1962 and other this thing that they carry out a lot of propaganda. They utilize speakers and try to give messages, use banners. That's the Chinese way of doing things. But also the capabilities which they have, they try to project much more than they, and their psychological warfare, even when they had POWs and the people who came back, they said that they were trying to brainwash them time and again. So that is the standard practice which was brought out by General KJ Singh in a very good manner. Then PLA's nexus with Pakistan, the debt trap, and the combined threat to India, the General touched upon it and brought out and gave clarity to it. Then also PLA's armed proliferation in the region, it is very cheap. They are very, they can be produced in bulk. Again, how much good they are, but there is this debate whether the numbers, the projection in numbers is greater or the qualities should be there. But definitely they are pumping in numbers and whatever they are worth. Then Xi Jinping's grand delusion of Great China and countering USA and its allies in the region, the General touched upon that also. Apart from that, the General took on the questions which were thrown by the students, by the learned faculty. Professor Shekhar Adhikari also threw some light. So overall, it was very, very interesting, put up very cogently, and the scholarly this thing effort which was there was very evident. So we thank the general for all his efforts, and also I would be doing injustice if I did not speak about our guests who are here. They're people from outside, they're people from our own faculty, they're dear students. I hope they learned something from us. A special thank to them. And of course, distinguished speaker today. Sir, we really thank you and appreciate your effort which you have put together. We hope to see you in our future programs, sir. And it would be a pleasure to host you once again. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rahul, for a wonderful effort and coordinating. And of course, Divya for searching out such a gem for us and, projecting him that speaking on PLA would be a very, very good thing. And the speaker, of course, would be very apt. So thank you all. Wonderful IT team, administrative, the people who are at the back. Aishan Tong, I can't forget because the flyers, etc., which he makes is lovely. All the thanks to you. And sir, thank you very much. We will see you in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. That's the icing on the cake, sir. Promise to
Sir,
call me in the
thank you,
future.
sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, General Singh, and thank you, participants, for joining in.
Thank you, General KJ.
Ishan, we can stop this recording. Thank you.